Hello, welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to back your Chinese brush painting. Sometimes this is called wet mounting, the Chinese brush painting. You can find out about the equipment you'll need to do this in part 1, but in this part 2, I'm going to show you how you actually go about backing the painting with a paper. So this is the painting I'm going to use. You can see that it's a bit creased up at the moment, and that's why we back the painting, in order to stretch it, make it nice and flat, and ready to put in a frame. So you can see that I've cut a piece of paper bigger than all round than the actual size of the painting. And when you first start, it's a good idea to give yourself a really generous safety margin, probably about 2 inches there, so that you've got plenty of room for manoeuvre. I've used the same paper as the paper that the painting was done on. This is generally a good idea because the papers will then stretch and contract at the same rate, and so we shouldn't get any problems. So I'm going to start first of all by cleaning my sealed surface. Now, I've used this surface many times and it's stained a bit with paint from other paintings, so we need to start by getting it really clean. So I'm going to first of all wash the surface. So whatever surface you're using, you need to use one that is sealed, because you can wet it without it being damaged, and one that's nice and smooth. So that's given it a good wash. I'm going to dry it out now. Now I can still see that there's a bit of paint and maybe a bit of seal paste left on the surface from the previous painting. So the next thing to do is to polish it with a bit of multi-purpose furniture polish. So I'll just do a good spray and polish it. This type of polish is very good for getting the seal paste off the surface that you're using as well. The added important effect of this polishing is it will make the surface nice and slippery, so that when you try to lift your painting off the surface, it should come away really easily. So it's not just about getting the surface clean, it's also about getting it nice and slippery and smooth, so that you can easily lift your painting off the surface. So it's not a step that you want to miss out. So I'm giving it a good polish, and it's now feeling really nice and smooth and slippery. So that's ready to use. I'm just going to now start to wet my painting on the back so that it starts to stretch. So this is the front of the painting. I'll turn it over. I've got it here on some felt. You want some sort of absorbent surface underneath to do this, in case any paint starts to lift slightly off the painting. If you've got it on a sealed surface at this point, that loosened paint can start to track across the painting, so you do want it on an absorbent surface. So let's just give it a good spray with water. You don't want to absolutely saturate it, but damp is what you need. Now, what we want to look for here is the paper becoming soft and pliant, because we want to encourage these creases out of paper. So the idea is that this dampening it will make the paper become more pliant. And I can already feel that it's starting to feel quite soft now, rather than sort of stiffer and crackly. It feels more soft and pliant. So I think we can move on to the next stage. So I'm now laying the painting onto that sealed surface that's nice and clean. And we put the painting again face down. So there's the front of the painting and this is the back of the painting. It's harder to tell at this stage because it becomes very translucent, but this is the back of the painting that faces upwards. So the next step is to persuade some more of these creases to come out of the painting. So I've got a really soft brush here and I'm going to support the painting gently with my fingertips and brush from the middle outwards all around the painting to persuade more of these creases to come out and for the painting to go flatter. So always work from the centre outwards with the brush held at a sort of 45-degree angle. You don't want to hold the brush upright, you want it at a 45-degree angle and gently stroke outwards from the middle of the painting. So I think that's pretty flat now. So we'll move on to the next stage, which is to apply the glue. Now the glue I'm using is a wheat starch glue which I've prepared yesterday. Again, I have made a video about how to make this glue, so if you don't yet know how to make it, I have made a video about how to make the glue. So I've got my glue brush here. You want a separate brush for each thing that you do with this, so that you don't get glue on the painting where you don't want it. So this is my gluing brush. Put that in the glue and we'll start again working from the middle outwards. And you want to probably support gently the painting with the other hand. And you want to go opposite ways. So I've gone from out to the top, so now I'm going to come to the bottom there. And then out to the left. And then out to the right. Again, keeping the brush at a low angle, about 45 degrees. You never want to do a scrubbing action or your painting will disintegrate. It's very delicate at this stage, so always gently and with the brush at about a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to do the diagonals now. Centre out to the right and centre out to the left. And the last two diagonals there. So having done those, I'm now going to go all the way round, just checking the whole painting is completely covered in a thin film of glue and is nice and flat on the board. So this is the stage where I'll look out for any little buckles and persuade them gently to come out. The thing you don't want to do is rush or panic with this. You need to sort of take your time and work slowly and carefully, because the paper is very delicate at this stage and it's very easily torn. So there we are. I think now I've got all of the painting flat down onto the board. But to make sure it's completely evenly covered with glue, I now bring my eye level down to the level of the surface of the painting and just scan across and check that there's no lumps of glue where the glue hasn't gone on evenly. The next stage is to wash around the painting so that we get that glue that's on the board off the board. So I'm using now a damp, clean damp cloth, and I'm going to wipe very carefully up against the edge of the painting. I try and aim to sort of just miss the painting itself, sort of you want a millimetre or two away from the actual edge of the painting. If you catch the edge of the painting with the cloth, it can buckle up, and then you've got to, you know, the difficulty of correcting that. So I usually aim to sort of keep the cloth just 1 or 2 millimetres away from the actual edge of the painting. Now, the reason for doing this is that then when we put the backing paper on, we'll have that dry margin all the way around, so we won't have, you know, the backing paper isn't going to get wet beyond the edge of the painting itself, and that means that having preserved that dry margin all the way around, the painting will be easier to lift up, because dry paper is much stronger than wet paper. So there we are, I've got the glue removed all the way around. I'm just going to dry my hands off now, because I'm going to pick up the backing paper and I don't want to get water on the backing paper, or it can buckle unevenly, so it's quite important to keep your hands dry when you're handling the backing paper. So here's my backing paper. You want to roll it up in the way that it wants to roll, because normally these are you buy them in a roll, so there's a way that they want to roll up, and I find it's best to stick with that direction. But when you're rolling it up, bear in mind the orientation of the paper, because if you try and unroll it across your painting the wrong way, you won't obviously have enough width of paper to cover the painting with that margin. So make sure you know which way you need to unroll it across the painting. So now I'm going to look at where the paper needs to go exactly in relation to the paper. So I want to look at the edge of the paper and the top of the painting, and look at the bottom edge of the paper, and again where the bottom edge of the painting is, and line up accordingly. You want to make sure that it's in position so that it's going to, when it unrolls, you'll have that margin all the way around the painting. So then, having unrolled just the very first piece, I put that down onto the painting, but I'm using my left hand to prevent the paper from rolling outwards across the painting at this stage. So I now take my dry brush that I'm going to use for brushing down the paper. I put a little bit of water onto that. Just work that water in, but make sure you don't pick up any paste. This brush must be paste free, just damp with water. So now I'm going to roll the paper across the painting, but I'm going to do that in a very controlled way. So I'll brush back and forth, but my left hand is supporting that roll of paper so that it'll only unroll at a very gradual rate. So we work the brush back and forth, but I'm using my left hand to control that unrolling of the paper so that it doesn't sort of quickly unravel. If you don't do it this way, what will happen is you'll get buckles. The backing paper will go down with buckles, which are then very hard to correct. So you want to support the unrolling of the paper with your left hand so that it only unrolls gently with each sweep of the brush. And now you can see it's gone down fairly evenly. I've got a little bit of a crease there, so I'm just going to gently tap that out. And then you want to make sure that you've got a good bond between the paper, your painting, and the backing paper. So to make sure that's nicely glued together, I'll do another pass with this brush, always gently, and perhaps the other way as well, just to make sure the two are firmly pressed together. As I say, if you've got any little creases or buckles, the way to probably do those is a little bit of gentle tapping with your brush. Or you can use your fingertip, just ease them out. A little bit of gentle tapping. But what you don't want to do is do any scrubbing action. Obviously that will immediately destroy your painting. Okay, so that's the paper down, and you can see I've got a good margin around. This a little bit tight on this edge. This is why I say you really want to give yourself a sort of a generous margin of paper, so that any sort of slight incorrect alignment when it's unrolled, you've still got that safety margin. So the next step is to transfer it to the drying board, but before I do that I'm going to paste a little bit of glue along one edge so that I can apply it to the board without it falling down. So I get my small paste brush and I'm going to put a line of paste along this very top edge here. It doesn't really matter which edge you use, any of them, it doesn't really matter. But I think is a good idea is that you don't go right up to near the painting. You want to leave still a little bit of dry, unpasted backing paper to help keep that strong. As soon as your paper is wet with paste, it's going to be weak. So if you can preserve a little margin all the way around of sort of fairly dry paper, it will make it stronger and therefore safer when you pick it up. So there, I've applied a line of paste along the top there. And now I'm going to lift the two layers of paper off the board. This is slightly tricky. The best thing to do is to fan your hand out so that as much of the weight of the paper is distributed as possible. If you use a pinching action, you're putting a lot of strain on a small area and it's more likely to tear. So keep your hand fanned out. The other problem you may have is that when you lift your paper, the paper will come up but the painting won't, in which case if you see that's happening, get a little pin, a dressmaking pin is fine, some little tiny sharp implement, and flick the paper, the painting up onto the backing paper. I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So let's pick up this corner here and peel back. Now you want to make sure that you keep your hands spread out. Now my painting is lifting. You can see there's the corner hopefully, of the painting there. But if it hadn't lifted, if you get your pin and just do a little flick and attach it, normally once it's attached at that corner, the whole thing will start to lift as one piece. So there we are, I'm lifting it up. I'm using my fingers spread out across the paper, and there it is lifted. Now we need to transfer it to the drawing board. So I'm going to now walk across to the drawing board and apply it to the drawing board. So here's my drawing board ready, and it's in a vertical position. That's quite important because of gravity then makes it a lot easier to do this step. So we put the painting, and there's I've got the glued edge there at the top, and I apply that to the drawing board, and then I'm going to press gently to stick that onto the board. So that's now stuck there. The next step is to glue all the way round the edge of the painting. The idea of this is that we want to glue all the way round the edge of that overhanging margin, but we don't want any glue underneath the painting itself. Otherwise we won't get the painting off the board. So I'm going to slip my little brush underneath that margin of paper and go all the way round. I'm using the other finger just to make sure the paper contacts the sticky brush, so we get glue all the way around there. And I'll do the same the other side. So I'll put this paste on the brush, slip it underneath the painting, underneath that backing paper, and go along. And I'm using the other hand to just make sure that that paper's getting pasted on the top as well as paste on the board. And then we do the lower edge as well. Some people say that you should put a straw in at this stage and blow air under your painting, but I find that step is unnecessary and you can get problems with tearing. So I've put the glue all the way around. I'm now to make sure it's all stuck down. So again, working opposite sides. So first that side there, and then the opposite side here, down to the bottom. And as I use my fingers to do this, I'm sort of patting and pulling outwards slightly at the same time to make sure that the painting is nice and stretched and everything is flat. And I've got a little wrinkle there, so let's just get the pin and correct that a little bit. Just lift the paper there. And tease that out, that's better. And as a final sort of safety precaution, I usually then get a little bit of paste on the brush and just go around all that glued margin on the top to make sure that it's all really firmly stuck down. There. So that's the painting stuck onto the board. So we've got, it should be firmly fixed all the way around, and then we leave it to dry. Usually maybe 1 to 3 days, depends on the humidity really, and you know, temperature. What you don't want to do is leave it somewhere where it will be exposed to extreme heat or sunlight. So don't, for example, put it in front of the heater thinking you'll speed the process up, because it'll probably, what will happen is the paper will crack because of the extremity. Likewise, if you don't put it to dry, where you've got the chance of hot sunshine at some point of the day sort of crossing the painting, that's another thing that can cause it to crack. So you want to leave it to dry somewhere where it'll sort of dry gradually with sort of fairly even heat. Once it's dry, we can then cut it off the board. So I'm just going to show you that stage. I've got one that I did yesterday. And I'm going to show you how to cut it off the board. So I'm using a scalpel blade for this, but some kind of craft knife is what you need. A fairly sort of thin type of craft knife. So I start by finding a place where I know that the paper isn't stuck down, where it's part of that backing sheet margin that's not stuck down. And I put the knife in at a low angle and wiggle it in so that I've got it underneath into that sort of pocket of air, if you like. And then once you're there, you can make little tiny back and forth movements and start to release the paper from the board. Some people use a ruler for this. I find it that I prefer just to get it off the board and then tidy it up afterwards. So I'm using just a little sort of back and forth movement, very small, so that I can control it to get it off the board safely. Now, so that's 2 sides released. And come down here now. You can see I'm using my other hand again to support the paper so that I don't get any, hopefully no sudden tears. Now, I think it's got to the point now where I can probably slice through there and release that section there. There's a little bit of resistance there still. There it comes. So there you are, and then we've just got the bottom edge to do along here. You need to be a bit careful. You don't want to get any creases in the painting at this stage, because any creases now, of course, will have spoiled your nice flattening of the painting. So there we are. It's released from the board. You can see it's now a lovely flat sheet of paper there that can go into a frame. Ready to present. So I hope that helps you with your Chinese brush painting wet mounting. That's the process that I use.